Oh yeah, there we go. Microphone. Good afternoon, everyone. This is going to be very, very exciting. We're going to talk about food tech and especially the future of alternative proteins today. We have a couple of very interesting panelists here, and let's start with the introduction. So if you can very briefly introduce yourself and the company you're representing here. We'll start with Maija.
This is not on. Okay, now it's on. Hi, my name is Maija Itkonen. I am the CEO and co-founder of OnegoBio. OnegoBio is a food biotech company that is producing non-animal bioidentical egg protein made with precision fermentation. And that's exactly what makes me this disruptive egg farmer. I have a few of these big size metal hens that are producing egg protein very efficiently.
Great. Let's see if mine's working as well. Good to see everyone. My name is Robert Jones, Vice President of Global Public Affairs for a Dutch food tech startup that pioneered the technology to grow meat from stem cells. The company is called Mosa Meat, and we focus on making beef. We're able to make a minced beef product without needing to kill the animal at a much lower carbon footprint, and working on regulatory approvals around the world right now.
Excellent, thank you. Because we have so many things to discuss, I will go straight into the sort of like setting up the overview. So, Robert, you promised to talk about a little bit like what's the big picture here? What are we looking at when we're talking about alternative proteins? So,
yeah.
So what's the big thing there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is understanding why have this conversation in the first place. So the Stockholm Resilience Center has identified 9 planetary boundaries to measure our progress as humans. And the food system alone is responsible for bursting us over 5 of those. Greenhouse gases, land use, water, biodiversity, and nitrogen. And the food and agriculture production system is on track to put us over 2 degrees Celsius and change by itself. So it's critical that we change that. And not only is that the problem today, but moving forward in the next 30 years, we'll have 10 billion people on the planet, and the FAO, UN FAO, expects that meat consumption is going to increase by as much as 50%. That's largely driven by a rising middle class in large countries like India and China. So we have to figure out a way to layer in other ways to make protein, because the way if we try to scale up the way we do it now, we destroy the planet. It's an existential challenge. So we have to look at layering in other types of protein made in different types of ways.
Yeah, so if a little clarification on this term. So alternative proteins, we are referring to this non-animal proteins, basically. You could kind of like divide it in two different sectors. So one is this like plant-based alternatives. That could be like just, for example, legume proteins. Then, of course, like, for example, algae-based, etc. But then on the other side, we have this cellular agriculture that is a super exciting area. That could be basically divided in 3 sub-segments. Say, first being that actual cultivated meat, what Robert was referring to. So that means actually growing those muscle cells directly, those animal cells in the bioreactors. Then when you go forward, you could see that there are these other ways that are more like looking at the cells, like the actual like microbial cells that are working for you. So not exactly necessarily eating them, but also working for you. So we talk about biomass fermentation. That could be like some fungal or bacterial cells that we're growing in the bioreactors, and then just making something that could like resemble the actual like a meat alternative or cheese alternative. So, and then we also have this system called precision fermentation that refers to the cellular factories that are not like eating the actual microbial cells, but allowing them to produce your protein, like sweating out or spitting out your protein, and what then you collect from this bioreactor. So there are multiple different technologies, and I would say that one of the main things to realize is that there's not going to be this one size fits all, that okay, which one is going to be the winner. No, absolutely not. We will have a need for all of these different systems that allow us to move away from these animal-based protein sources.
Yes, and actually to add to that, then there's even more. So there's a combination of these different technologies, right? So for example, people are now talking about blended foods. Anyone want to elaborate a little bit? What's blended food?
Yeah, I'll take a quick crack at that. So I think many of you in the audience have probably before tried a Beyond Burger or Vegetarian Butcher or any sort of plant-based product. If you are a meat lover like me, it didn't deliver the sensory experience that you wanted. And they just won't with coconut oil and palm oil. But for us, as a B2B product, we're considering having our cultivated beef fat to be able to sell to plant-based companies, to have a small amount of inclusion of beef fat in a plant-based product, so you get that Maillard reaction in the pan and the caramelization and the smell of the beef and a better sensory experience. And I would classify that as a blended product.
Yeah, honestly, I mean, I've always been fascinated about this overlapping areas. So to say that, are we talking about like technologies or cultures or whatever? Like always, when you start kind of going to the areas that is between two different things or utilizing two different things is always the most exciting. So honestly, I also do believe that this overlapping of these are going to be the most important thing.
Yes, and talking about that, what you think? There has been some news recently about the plant-based alternative proteins not flying, and I've even heard some people going like, "Ha ha ha! There you go. It's for real meat, and no one wants it." But I know that's not the whole story. So why did that happen? And why it wasn't the end of the story?
Yeah, it's been always weird. Things are always moving forward in these different stages. It's kind of wave after wave after wave. So that's just how life is. I mean this recent wave a few years back, I would say that maybe that was again presented in the media, so that now everybody is going to move to the plant-based diet. I mean, of course, that's not the case, but it opened a lot of new doors and allowed many people to really try and test. Okay, it is actually possible to eat really great tasting food without having the meat. So that's already a great achievement. And then now it's just again getting to these more different kinds of protein sources, and again going to this mixing and overlapping. So yes, absolutely, I do believe that there's a great future awaiting for the alternative proteins.
Yeah, I'll just say a quick thing. I mean, I think it's unfair to group the entire plant-based sector in together. There's a lot of products out there that are not good, and they won't succeed as a result of it. But there's a number of them that are very good. The Impossible brand and the Impossible beef, I think, is the best plant-based product out there, and they're killing it. They're doing well. So I think sometimes there's sort of folks with a negative outlook on the sector grouping everyone together, but it's a natural part of disruption. There's going to be some companies that are better than others, and they survive.
And actually, I believe if you look at the statistics on the sort of the startup environment, that a lot of this sort of a little bit negative news there was more related to the overall funding climate, because it wasn't just the food, but for some reason it was picked up. But it's getting better now, right? So we have the recent numbers showing that it's getting better. That's good. But let's talk next about the different regions, because this also is different depending which part of the world we are. Maija, what are your favorite regions when it comes to novel foods? And maybe some non-favorite regions as well. Yeah,
well, I mean, Finland is my favorite hub because it has we have a great technology hub for creating these biotech innovations. Especially in my field, we're working with this filamentous fungus technology that has originated from VTT, where the research goes back into the 1980s, actually. So there's a very long heritage on that. But yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it is now so that we can't really rely on Europe as our first market, because this regulatory side is extremely slow in Europe. So I'm more thinking kind of that the world is a playground, especially when we are producing eggs. It's absolutely everywhere. The biggest markets that are utilizing eggs are Mexico #1, Japan #2. So they're just complete opposites, if you look at the map. but they're the highest consumption, and everybody else goes with them. So just saying that the world is a playground, and I really, really like this kind of like international approach, and I recommend that for all of the startups. You cannot be just seeing like, we are a Finnish company from Finland, now we need to sell in Finland. Well, that's not going to happen. You just need to say like, okay, we need some great technology, where to get that from, where to get the great talents from, where could we get the customers from, where can we produce, where can we sell. So it's just a puzzle that you just need to create.
And Robert,
Yeah.
same question.
Yeah, so let's maybe start at the macro level. I mean, first, the global food system is worth 14 plus trillion US dollars. It's expected to be more than $20 trillion by 2040, which is more than 20% of the global GDP. So this is truly a global investable opportunity and also global challenges. In terms of innovation hubs in the world, I mean, no offense to Finland, but the Netherlands has really got a lot going on as well. Singapore, Israel, the US, and there's especially a lot of activity in the US now with the Inflation Reduction Act and President Biden's executive order on biotech and biomanufacturing. And I think if we're not careful, we're going to see the center of gravity for innovation shift away from Europe. Because of what Maija mentioned, is the regulatory process it's the gold standard in the world, and once you have it, you can use it pretty much anywhere, but it does take too much time, and that's why we've been working to push the European Food Safety Authority and the Commission to optimize the process a little bit so that we don't miss out on this global opportunity to reform the food system by layering in complementary proteins.
When you say us, who do you mean?
Yeah, so I think it's a sign of maturity of the industry, both for cultivated meat and precision fermentation and alternative proteins in general. We've gotten more organized. So we have an industry association that I lead in Brussels called Cellular Agriculture Europe. It represents a dozen companies across Israel, the UK, Switzerland, the EU. Basically working with stakeholders in the European constellation of the approval process to say, here's what we've learned from working with the Singapore Food Agency and the Food Standards Agency in the UK, FDA in the US, and here's some ways we think you can optimize the process to make it more efficient, but without obviously sacrificing food safety.
And Maija, you have similar things, but on other places.
Yeah, so at Onego we have been the founder of two alliances. So one is the Food Fermentation Europe, that is like a European association, and then also Precision Fermentation Alliance in the US that also now has this branch in Europe. So yeah, I mean, like having this joining forces is extremely important. At the same time, I also don't think that it should be like just these small startups just playing together, but more and more we also getting these big corporations to follow and to kind of like, because there are a lot of people in the big corporations who absolutely see this opportunity in the same way and want to be part of this. So this is not like a startup club thing, but more kind of like this joining forces and getting organized as an industry.
Yeah. Can I add something real quickly to that? I think that's another sign of maturity of the space, is that we're beginning to see that the CVCs inside of Cargill, Tyson, Smithfield, Unilever, Nestle are beginning to invest in the alternative protein space in a substantive way. Because they see it as a revenue opportunity. And for us, we're thrilled with that because it presents probably the best exit strategy as well. Because I don't think there will be a lot of food companies that have IPOs as much as acquisition opportunities with multinational food companies that I'm beginning to see start to line up with the space.
Do you see any differences? Like we're talking about multinationals, but they still originate from somewhere. So did you see differences like between the North America, Europe, Asia? Are there like the big Japanese trading houses on this already, or?
Yeah, well, I mean, one of our investors is Mitsubishi, which as a conglomerate has everything under their portfolio. But I would say that the largest national, multinational food corporation play that we're seeing is from big companies like JBS out of Brazil, big meat companies out of the US, and then the giants in Europe, Nestle and Unilever.
And this is something that also has been like changing over the years, that it maybe started so that there were some some kind of like a bigger corporations who kind of like just wanted to have this little lottery ticket on somebody, or just kind of like look good, that your name is on the press release or something that is very advanced. But this is luckily now changing, that there are these companies who are actually really seeing that opportunity and want to be part of that. So I think that this is getting like also like a little bit more healthy, because these like tourist investors are this is just fading away, luckily.
Well, you mentioned, Robert, something about the things being a bit slow in Europe. Maija, you have actually you both have experience on that, and your companies have sort of like reacted to this a different way. But let's start. Maija, can you open up a little bit, because you sort of like chose, at least for now, to look a bit outside, and that's been even in the news. So could you sort of like talk about the reasons for that, and maybe the future plan as well?
Yeah, like I said, I mean, the roots of our innovation is at VTT, so that's the VTT Technical Research Center of Finland, so that's like one of the oldest and most renowned research organizations in Europe since 1980s. But when the time comes to commercialize these things, unfortunately, it doesn't look very likely that we can just rely on staying in Europe. But at the same time, I'm just seeing that like this is really the best possible thing to do to show with an example that we can actually make business, and we will get these approvals, because we are now in this approval like a period, and it actually goes really nicely at the moment. So just saying that. Showing that the business is really like a taking off, and we have these customers, we are getting these approvals in the United States first, and then coming back to Europe. I at least hope that will be speeding up the market entries in Europe. But honestly, I just see that like this is something that I owe for my investors, that I really need to bring the revenues as fast as possible. I cannot just be like doing any philanthropic work, just waiting for some regulatory side to get sorted out. So I just need to start selling ASAP, and then following as soon as possible with the other regulatory areas.
So, but what was the reason with Europe? Can you open up, because you chose not to go Europe first?
Yeah, no, I mean, the thing is that it takes maybe like at least 3 years to get these approvals like in Europe from filing to market. But it's not only that, because the actual even application process is quite limiting, mainly because of the fact that your system needs to be the final one before you apply. So you can't do any kind of like, of course, it's very understandable that you cannot change it, but you cannot even like make it even at all more efficient. It's like the absolute final one once you file it. So just saying that that just means that it takes like a long time before you can even apply, because who would have your absolute final industrial process in place a couple of years after founding the company? That's not very likely. So that means that in Europe we just need to we need to wait until we have this final system in place, and then meanwhile we already could start a business elsewhere.
What do you think was the reason for that? Why is it so slow? It's not that slow, because there are similar processes there, but they're different in other parts of the world.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the misunderstandings, that sometimes people think that this, like for example, the United States, the FDA approval would be somehow easy. That's not at all the case. It's actually very, very demanding and very difficult. So it requires like very thorough process planning, and then these trial runs. You need to have these 5 consecutive runs. You need to analyze each and every run after the processing. So just saying that it's like a really demanding process already. It takes like a couple of years even in there that you're ready to actually file it. But then in Europe, for some reason, there is this kind of like this, somehow like this black hole, that there is absolutely no communication with the authorities. And as the Precision Fermentation Alliance and this food fermentation Europe, we've been also meeting with EFSA and meeting with all kinds of like EU representatives, and so far it's extremely difficult to pinpoint anybody who would be the root cause, because it's like everybody seems to be thinking that this system is totally insane. It doesn't make any sense. And especially in our case, we are producing this food with the method that is already known. So it's something that is a very common method for producing all kinds of food additives like enzymes and colors and flavors and rennets and citric acids, whatnot. And then the protein is the bioidentical egg. So it's just saying that you have this combination of two very well-known ones, and then you just put those together, it's a new one. So that's kind of like something that nobody seems to think that makes any sense, but it just has been like that. And I think it's more kind of that we just need to renew it from inside and really get the right parties involved in this process of changing it.
Yeah, Robert.
Yeah, well, a couple of comments there. I think generally maybe I'm a little less cynical, but I absolutely 100% understand where you're coming from. I think for us, we're an impact-driven company. Frankly, making cultivated beef is the hardest protein you can make. Working with chicken cells or fish cells is way easier, but we've stayed focused on beef for climate reasons. And there is no path to really impacting the global food system in terms of greenhouse gases without the 400 million consumers in Europe. And so while we haven't put all of our eggs in that basket, I have dossiers pending in multiple geographies and waiting on approval any day now in Singapore. We're still dedicated to trying to move Europe in the right direction. And I think the question, why is it slow, I think is answerable because I think there's a lack of policy coherence between the public policy goals of the EU and the regulatory structure. So if you use Singapore as an example, they import 95% of their food. They knew that was a real vulnerability in a trade war. And so they passed what was called the 30 by 30 plan in 2017 to be producing 30% of their own food by 2030. And they put that national goal, that policy coherence filtered down through every ministry, including the Singapore Food Agency. And they thought, how can we proactively meet this national goal? We don't have that in Europe. Like we have the European Green Deal is stalled out, the farm to fork strategy is stalled out. There's still not a clear tie between reforming food and agriculture to meet our climate, biodiversity, food, land use goals. So I think that would be very helpful. And fundamentally, the novel foods law in Europe is based on the precautionary principle, right? It was never designed to stimulate innovation. It was meant to keep scary things out of the market. And we need a little bit of a mind shift in European Food Safety Authority and the Commission to be thinking about the novel foods law as a way to stimulate innovation that helps us meet our European goals.
You're sort of like thinking it should be more considered more like an opportunity than a threat.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. 400 million consumers, real impact on climate change, biodiversity, and obviously a real opportunity to make money.
Yeah, and at the same time, I mean, this European approval is a great entry ticket anywhere in the world. Yeah. I mean, if you're approved in Europe, everybody believes it's like a welcoming ticket to anywhere.
Well, what would be sort of like I know all the regulators out there. No, maybe not, but
any regulators there?
Yeah. So what would be sort of like a quick fixes to this EFSA procedures and the European novel food? What would be a quick fix?
Yeah, I mean, if you ask the EFSA representatives, they would say that there needs to be a lot of more resources, because this is also like Robert was mentioning. This was actually not meant for stimulating innovations. It was really like meant for keeping foreign things out. But at the same time, we now have entered this food innovation. A startup food innovation phase only like a decade, since 1 decade, Like it used to be so that food innovation comes from these big corporations who have been developing something for years, and then little by little it comes to the market and so on. But suddenly we got this totally new logic that, hey, actually food could also come from startups, which is like an entirely like a different mindset for creating foods. So this system was not built for that. So we absolutely need like more resources and more this willingness to actually answer to those needs of the food startups. For example, very simple examples. Just to kind of have this pre-submission negotiations or pre-submission advice and even courses. Make this kind of application. Make sure that you have this. There's a consultant who could give you advice, whatever. So this kind of easy fixes could be there.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think the good news is that there's some simple administrative changes you could make to the EFSA approach without needing to change the novel foods law that would make a lot of difference. EFSA risk assessors being willing to have pre-submission consultation with us, where we can co-learn together. This is an extraordinarily new technology. I mean, they need to learn from us. We need to learn from them what their concerns are about components in our production process. Or that would go a long way to making the risk assessment phase move faster. And they're beginning to open up. They're beginning to see that this is working safety in other regions, but there's still a long way to go.
That's interesting. I know that we could talk about this particular issue for a long time, but before we end, just let's talk about the sort of like the big opportunities. So a lot of people are seeing like the food industry as in a way like, well, we need to eat, but climate, but poverty, but all these big problems that are actually related to food production for the humankind. So could you just like talk a little bit quickly about the sort of like the big opportunities there are sort of like with this novel approaches in the future? So.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, there are so many opportunities around, and we really haven't seen it all. So all of these system-level changes on producing food, like the whole like circularity in the food system, etc. There is so much to do, and we kind of like should keep our eyes open and remember that this hasn't been seen yet, and the current alternative proteins are neither the final ones. There are going to be a lot of these new opportunities. New opportunities means business, means a lot of income for the ones who actually set it up and who decide to invest in them. So let's just keep pushing on that.
Yeah, I would say the food system right now globally is creating a triple threat of contributing to climate change, the third largest driver of climate change, biodiversity loss, and food insecurity, which is driven by both lack of nutrition and lack of access. But the good news is that there's an opportunity to address all three of these by pursuing a protein diversification strategy, and not just depending on animal agriculture as the primary protein source. And this is very much targeted more towards Western diets in the global north, where we clearly need to eat less meat. That's not necessarily true in the global south. And by layering in all of these different types of technologies, it's not a replacement for animal agriculture, but it helps meet that future demand that I described, that 50% increase in demand in the next 30 years, by layering in all of these extra options for protein. And I see it as a toolbox, right? We only meet that triple threat challenge of biodiversity, climate change, food insecurity by having a diverse toolbox of solutions. Some of them will work better in other regions than other, but we need to lift up all of these technologies and make that investment now for the coming decades.
I must say, all this, what you were just explaining here, this is one of the things that is personally has been driving me for years and years, and I can see that more and more people sort of like getting there, like seeing the opportunities, seeing the potential impact, and actually making a purpose out of it. So it's really good. Now, as a very final thing, I would like to ask you sort of like I don't know, is it 1, 2, or 3 sort of like things to remember? So these things, like if you have your cameras on, put them on video, because now you're going to get like the key takeaways from this. So what will it be?
Yeah, so if I start, let's remember that there are great business opportunities in this food transition and the green transition of the food system. So we need to keep the barrier super high and keep the ambition levels like really high. And remember that if somebody says that, we can't afford this change, it's like nobody has that money. But it's gonna be this previous version also was financed by governments, and this transition will be financed as well.
I'll be very quick. Again, the food system is the third largest driver of climate change. But unlike oil and gas, the food system can actually be modified to be a mitigator of climate change and have a net zero effect. So there's a huge circular investable opportunity there for you social impact investors, social-oriented impact investors, to make a real difference for the planet and also make an incredible amount of money in the process.
Excellent. We have 5 seconds left, so I'll just say, thank you, our panelists. Thank you for the audience. Let's keep saving our food planet together. Okay, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.